Happy hump day, boob tube. Let's hope it works out as a hump day for all of us. A happy kind of hump day. I've been up to lots of stuff recently. The summer took a turn for the worse in August here. It's been like hot days a lot of the time. Some cool days, but the nights have started to get cool. And we've had like inexplicable amounts of like torrential downpours with thunder and lightning, and of course it all started right after I planted grass seed. So every morning I go out and I friggin' rake the grass seed back into the place where it's supposed to be, and then it just ends up getting washed away the next day. So but anyways, it's still summer. I'm going to try and enjoy the rest of it, and I'm going to try and still get up to as much stuff as I do, both inside and outside. But the last batch of stuff I've done, we'll begin with this movie. My last video, I think I mentioned the Tooth Fairy, the first one with The Rock. This one is a follow-up in no relation to the first one, other than the theme of it. It stars Larry the Cable Guy as the main character, who is in the film is also named Larry. He lives in a small town in Florida, and he has this girlfriend, Brooke, who seems to be way out of his league. They seem to love each other, though, but one day when they're on the way to like Brooke's niece's birthday or something like that, they pass the bowling alley where they're having a contest to give away a brand new Camaro, and Larry has to go in and enter the contest against Brooke's wishes that they're going to be late to this party. When they get there, there's a guy named Bo running the competition who does not like Larry and who secretly loves Brooke, so he's like, oh, I'll help this discord along by pulling the ballot and making Larry win no matter who's on the ballot, right? So then he has to stay and do this trick bowling shot in order to seal the deal. He accidentally makes it after slipping in some nacho cheese, and but although he gains the Camaro, he loses the girlfriend. About a year later, he's working with his buddies at the shop. He's a mechanic, and finds out that Brooke is going to marry Bo Billings, the guy that set him up for this fall, who was also running for mayor, as it happens. So Larry goes to Brooke and tries to express how much of a douchebag this guy is and that she should not marry him. She won't listen to him, but he volunteers to work at her daycare center, which she runs, but it's been underfunded. Funding's been cut. She's had to let go all of her staff, so she's having problems keeping up with just herself running this place, as well as the funding for the supplies and stuff. So he volunteers to help out, and at first it's super rough. And he even convinces one kid, Russell, that the Tooth Fairy isn't real. And of course later on that night he has this dream about becoming a Tooth Fairy and sprouting wings, and wakes up and goes, ooh, it was only a nightmare. Turns out it's not, because soon afterwards he sprouts wings for real, gets teleported or whatever to the Tooth Fairy kingdom, and meets the girl that's his caseworker, a young girl named Nyx, who's actually old. And she explains the situation about being a dream killer, and he has to get 10 teeth in 10 nights in order to fulfill his obligations to the Tooth Fairy world. And so, of course, just like in the first one, as he collects these teeth, he starts learning lessons. It helps him deal with his relationship with Brooke. It helps him appreciate the kids at the daycare and help them learn and be friends and appreciate everything. And in the end, of course, it all comes down to one epic night where he has to fulfill some long odds and hopefully in the process win his girl back. So a really funny movie. Again, it's you know, these cheesy family flicks that most critics and other people are gonna go ugh, but it's great. It's lighthearted, it's fun, it's ridiculous, it's everything you want in like a young family kind of comedy. So I do recommend. Next thing, I had no idea this was even a show, but in the late 80s, 1988, I guess, a year after the RoboCop movie came out, Marvel and Stan Lee released this cartoon, RoboCop, the animated series. That's my own artwork, well, not artwork, but I printed it out and trimmed it and everything on myself. I was so proud. Anyways, it's a short series. It's only 12 episodes long. It focuses on a guy named Alex Murphy, who is a cop in the future in old Detroit. During the course of his service, though, on the first day with his new partner, Ann Lewis, he gets shot by a criminal, and OCP, Omni Consumer Products, I think is what they're called. they save his life by turning him into like a cyborg. So as he moves along afterwards, he has to cope with. He's got all these newfound abilities with his cyborg body, but at the same time, he has to struggle with, well, I've got all these new abilities, but am I human anymore? Like, what am I? And then also Anne Lewis has these kind of romantic feelings towards him, even though he's a cyborg now. And he's like, well, can that even be a thing anymore? So he's got all these things going on. And at the same time, he's out on the streets dealing with gang violence and killer spores and corruption within the, well, not corruption, but prejudice within his own department with Lieutenant Hedgecock, who seems to want to get him out of the way. Evil doctor named Dr. McNamara, who is trying to build technology to replace RoboCop and most of the human police force, but he gets kind of rebuffed at every turn. And in the end, at the end of the series, he actually squares off against the guy who shot him and turned him into RoboCop in the first place. And it's kind of the struggle of, do I let RoboCop's sense of justice and doing the right thing just bring him in and put him to trial, or does his animal human instinct kick in and say, I'm just going to shoot this motherfucker in the face right now and be done with it? And so that's kind of how the series ends. It's a good series. It's not anything groundbreaking for the time, but a solid watch, and certainly better than most of the things that pass for cartoons these days, right? So another good cartoon to add to the watched collection. Next up, the second book in the Max Tilt series, called 80 Days or Die. So in the first book, they went on Max Tilt and his cousin Alex from Canada. They knew they were descendants from Jules Verne, the author of Olden Times, and they went on an adventure that retraced some of his steps from his 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea book and recovered this massive treasure. So now the family's rich, and at the end of the book, his mom was declared cancer-free, so they're having a party for her at the start of this book. So it's Max and his dad, Alex, and then Max's two friends, Smarity is her name, it's really weird spelling, and then his other friend, Evelyn, who is new to the story at this point, who suffers from some condition called scleroderma or something like that, but I guess basically your skin hardens and you only have months and maybe years to live at best, once the condition kind of kicks in. And at the party, she suffers some sort of episode and is taken to the hospital. And she's given, I think, just under a year to live, a number of months. So Max is heartbroken. At the same time, Alex is working on Jules Verne's next riddle. When she finally decodes it, it points towards another adventure taken from Around the World in 80 Days, the book that he wrote. Which will lead them to some sort of magical elixir that can give people health and heal them. So they're like, oh, well, isn't this handy? So around this same time, also, they discover that the guy that helped them on their last adventure against Spencer Niemand, Basili, who died helping the kids, his funeral is being held in London, England, so they feel they should fly over there in the family jet. They're rich now. And attend the funeral. While they're there, they meet a weird old guy named Nigel who claims to be their uncle and leaves them a strange note, as well as a young girl named Bitsy who is a descendant, or not a descendant, but a relative of Basili's. And so they don't know if they can trust either of these people, but at the time they decide to partake on this adventure, and doubly so because they find out from Max's dad that while they've been away, his mom's cancer has relapsed and she's sick again. So they now have two really big reasons to find this thing if it's indeed real and hopefully heal their family and friends. So then the adventure takes them to the Kozim River in Russia. Oh God, where else? Kathmandu. The Sierra Gordo Mountains in Mexico, and they have to obtain, Greece, some caves in Greece, and they have to obtain these really rare, weird artifacts, or living things, like the Mexico one's this rare cactus that's almost extinct, and hopefully create this elixir with all these ingredients and save their friends and family. So it's just a matter of, do they have the time? Will they be able to access all these rare ingredients? And if they do, will it even work, or is it just a big hoax? So another great fast-paced story. I really like this series. I love it when stuff retraces, not historical stuff, but like previous stories. Like Jules Verne wrote these stories, what, hundreds of years ago, or a couple hundred, whatever it is. And so they go back and kind of use them as a guideline for these stories and expand upon them and kind of rework them and stuff. I always like that sort of thing. So a really good series. I'm loving it so far. Next one, Solo, a Star Wars story, the expanded edition. So it's basically just the movie with a little more backstory on what's going on in any given scene, what may be going on somewhere else during a scene that's on screen at the time. If you haven't seen the movie, like, I don't know if I need to recount this story. It's Han Solo and well, he doesn't have the last name Solo at the time, but and his girlfriend Kira are owned by the Scrum Rats on Corellia. Lady Proxima is their overlord. Han sets up a botched deal to obtain this rare hyperfuel, coaxium, and keep some for himself, which would buy his and Kira's passage off Corellia and out to freedom. He's going to buy his own ship, become a pilot. He engineers this plan. It almost works. He gets away. She doesn't. He enlists with the Imperial Navy. He wants to become a pilot. They kick him out because he's too much of a loose cannon. He goes to infantry. Well, on the battlefield, he meets this guy named Tobias Beckett, who at first he thinks is an Imperial officer, but he's not. He's just a mercenary. They're there for a job to obtain a shuttle, a hauler. Han picks up on this, finally convinces them to join his crew. Along the way, rescues a Wookiee named Chewbacca, who becomes his wingman, and they join his crew. They try to heist a big shipment of coaxium on the planet Vandor. It goes wrong. Then they get in trouble with Tobias's boss, who is the leader of Crimson Dawn, a massive criminal syndicate. And this guy's got a huge temper. He's a whack job. And while they're talking to him about what they can do to make it up to him, Han finds out that Kira is somehow this guy's right-hand man, or woman in this case. So this guy, God, now I forget his name. Anyways, decides he's going to kill them, but they sweet-talk their way out of it and say, we can get unrefined coaxium, bring it to this planet that refines it, get it all back to you, it'll all be good, it'll be the same thing. So he agrees and tells Kira to go along with them, so they go to the planet Kessel, after talking to Lando Calrissian, the owner of the Millennium Falcon, who is going to fly them there. So then they go to Kessel, they obtain the coaxium after a massive outbreak at the mine, and Lando's injured, his droid is destroyed, and on the way back, Han and Chewie have to fly the Millennium Falcon through the maelstrom outside of Kessel and do the Kessel run in, 12 parsecs or whatever it was, which, of course, you know, is referenced in the first Star Wars. So it's just this backstory of Han's kind of beginnings and how he obtains the Millennium Falcon, how he meets Lando, how he becomes friends with Chewbacca, and that was just kind of a brief overview of it, but I don't think I need to review Star Wars movies, because who hasn't seen it? And if you haven't seen it, don't be stupid, go see it. Last couple of items. The first one, a Wii game called Nerf N-Strike. James was really excited to get this. You start the game as a teenage kid, I guess, or a young teenager named Sean, who's in an arcade playing a shooter game, and after he's done, you can see from within the machine that it's kind of measuring his results and kind of scanning him and stuff, and then he's approached afterwards by this N-Strike organization on becoming a trainee with them. So then basically you go to their organization and you train against 3 other trainees. You try and beat their high scores in various challenges. Usually you're shooting robots, or you're recognizing targets and shooting the right ones in a certain amount of time, that sort of thing. And then as you progress through each character's arena, it gets harder and harder. And then in the end, it's revealed that the machine that's running this program, named Bob, is actually planning on taking over the world, and is kind of measuring all the trainees' moves and quantifying them and storing them and learning how to fight by watching the trainees, and so he turns on you in the end, and then you have one last level where you have to take down Bob and save the day. So it's a good game. It's short, and it's kind of repetitive, but it's one of those ones where you point the Wii remote at the screen to shoot, and the controls are really good, and so it's a solid game. It's not anything huzzah, it's a 10, but I'd say it's a solid 7, and for how quick it is, it doesn't get stale, even though it is kind of repetitive. It's short enough to be a nice little adventure, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. So that was a good pickup, especially I got it used at Game Cycle for like $2 or whatever, so you can't go wrong with that. Last one, Need for Speed Shift 2 Unleashed. I never heard of this series before I found it at Game Cycle. You start off the game by being introduced to a guy named Vaughn Gittin Jr., who is like a Formula D driver or something like that. He kind of becomes your tutor, your mentor as you enter races and learn different styles of racing, graduate to bigger classes of cars, more stakes in the races. And as you go up, you gain more cars, you gain more XP, which gets you more stuff, and eventually you kind of tap out at the maximum level and beat the game. But this game I found, at the start I really liked it when the races were manageable, but I found it kind of, nothing, it didn't escalate. It just stayed the same game. It's just that things got a bit harder, but kind of stayed the same. And they got too hard. You got to some of the later, like I was on the second or third last kind of tier, and you got into these races at Nürburgring, which is a super hard track, and you got these super fast cars, and they're so hard to control that you just shift your weight the wrong way and you roll or something, and you're rolling down the track for a minute, and then you're screwed. You can't win the race after that. You can't catch up. And the computer racers never seem to have these hiccups and wipe out themselves. And whenever you're involved in a collision, you're the one that takes the worst of it. You're the one that goes into a wall and then has to reset. But everybody else somehow navigates it perfectly and is gone and out of your sight. So you have to run a perfect race in order to win those races, and which is, virtually impossible. And I was racing the fastest, best cars in the game. Like I had a Bugatti or something like that, and I couldn't do it. Like it was just too hard. So it kind of went for me in the end. I was just like, you know what, I'm done with this shit. It's a good looking game. It controls okay. It's just the vehicles are a bit too sensitive or something. They just don't control quite right. Not enough to make it it should have been a little more arcadey controls. Like I know they were trying to be a simulation, and in some cases that's good. Like Gran Turismo, it's manageable. And the cars aren't quite as loosey-goosey as these, but these, it was like any little wrong shift of the stick and you were into disaster. Like it's crazy. So it's too bad, because it really was a fun game at the start, but it just kind of soured and went south the further and further I got into it. So I do have the first one, which I picked up after I had the second one, so I'll see if that one's any better, if the first was better than the second, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'd say that game's probably like a 5 or a 6, compared relative like to a Turismo, which is like a 9 or a 10, right? So, but anyways, that is all for now. I've got lots more in the works, of course, so I will be back sooner rather than later, especially with the summer coming to the end and me being forced indoors in the near future, I'm sure. So, yeah, until then, have a great rest of the week, and stay healthy.